Hello everyone, welcome to my channel Botany for Neet. Let us solve a question which is asked in Neet examination. Large, colorful, fragrant flowers with nectar are seen in insect pollinated plants, bird pollinated plants, bat pollinated plants, wind pollinated plants. Before we solve this question, let us understand what is pollination. It is the process of transfer of pollen grains from the anther to the stigma in a flower. See here, this is an example of, this is a picture showing the stamen, where stamen is the male reproductive part in the flower, and it consists of filament and an anther. What does the anther contain? It contains pollen sac, which consists of pollen grains. Okay. And basically here you can see a flower which is having the male reproductive part, that is the stamen, and the female reproductive part which is known as pistil, or it is also known as carpel. Basically, pistil, also known as carpel, it consists of three parts: ovary, which is the basal part that is attached to the thalamus, style, long tube-like structure, and stigma, which is the receptive part. That is, this is the part where the pollen grains fall and land. Okay, so basically, this is the stigma. Now, when I say pollination, that means it is a process where the pollen grains present on the in the pollen sac, they get transferred onto the stigma in a flower. This process is called pollination. Now, pollination is of two types. It can be self-pollination or cross-pollination. Let us understand what these are. Self pollination is transfer of pollen grains from anther to the stigma of same flower or a different flower within the same plant. This is very important. Please highlight it when you are making notes. So basically here the transfer of pollen grains is occurring from anther to the stigma either in the same flower or different flower but within the same plant. Let us understand it with a figure. Now see here, let us consider a plant. Let us consider this is hibiscus plant. Okay. Now this flower has, I'm sorry, the flower has stamens, and it also has the female reproductive part which is the stigma. Now if there is transfer of pollen grains from the anther to the stigma of the same within the same flower, or transfer of pollen grains onto the stigma of different flower but within the same plant, the whole pollination is occurring within the same plant, either it can be in the same flower or different flower, then it is considered to be self pollination. Okay, self pollination is transfer of pollen grains from anther to the stigma of the same flower or different flower within the same plant. And what is cross pollination? It is the transfer of pollen grains from anther to the stigma in a different plant of the same kind. Same kind is the key point here. Now see here, let us consider these are two plants, hibiscus, separate hibiscus plants. Okay. Now, if the pollen grains from this stamen are falling onto the stigma of this flower, which is present on different plant completely, entirely, that is called cross pollination. But it is most important that it should be of the same kind. Why is it so? If, for example, the pollen grains from a flower of hibiscus plant is falling onto the stigma of rose plant, then can we consider that event as pollination? No way. Why? Because there is no compatibility occurring between the pollen grains and the stigma. It's therefore, for pollination, for successful pollination to occur, the pollen grains from the stamen have to fall onto the stigma of another flower, but it should be of same kind. Okay, that is cross pollination. Now, what is the advantage of cross pollination? It allows variation and genetic diversity. That means, for example, consider this plant produces large flowers. Okay, and this hibiscus plant produces flowers which are highly fragrant. That means their smell is so nice. Now, obviously, when pollination occurs, the seeds that we get out of the plant, which later develop into saplings, there might be plants which are both large and fragrant. Fragrant. I'm sorry, fragrant. So basically, you can get in the progeny. That means the seeds out of these two plants which are both large as well as where the flowers are both large and fragrant, so there can be genetic diversity seen, but here whatever characteristics which are present in the parent plant, the same will be obtained. Okay, there's no variation or genetic diversity seen in case of self pollination, but cross pollination allows variation to take place. Okay, so it's quite useful in fields, crop fields, to get various traits in the plants. Okay, so after understanding self pollination and cross pollination, one thing we need to understand that these pollen grains are non motile. That means they cannot move by themselves. They require certain agents for them to transfer onto the stigma of different plant, same flower, or different flower. So these agents, the agents can be air, it can be water, it can be insects, or it can be birds. Okay, and pollination by air is also known as anemophily. When pollination is occurring by air, it is also known as anemophily. By water, it is called hydrophily. By insects, it is known as entomophily. Entomology is the study of insects. Birds, it's called ornithophily. And if it occurs by bats, then it is called chiropterophily. These terms are quite important. So, kindly highlight them. So, anemophily is pollination by wind or air, pollination by water, hydrophily, pollination by insects, entomophily, pollination by birds, ornithophily, and pollination by bats, chiropterophily. Okay, now let's see the question. Basically, when the pollination occurs by wind, such plants, the pollen grains are very lightweight. They're in lightweight characteristics of these plants, and they're feathery. The pollen grains are feathery. Okay, that's the characteristic of wind pollinated plants. If it is water pollinated plants, then basically the flowers produce large number of pollen grains. Why is it so? Because most of the pollen grains are washed away by water currents. Okay, that's the reason they produce large number of pollen grains. Bat pollinated flowers, these are usually pale because bats are nocturnal. That means they are awake during the night. Okay, and insect pollinated plants, these are usually very large, colorful, fragrant with nectar. Why is it so? This is because best example is your bees, honey bees. They account for more than 90% of pollination in the crop fields, where these honey bees, they come for the nectar and the fragrance to the flowers, and as they collect the nectar, some of the pollen grains get stuck to the body of the honeybees. Okay, the pollen grains which are present, they get stuck to to their body, and once when these honeybees again go to another plant of the same kind, for example, let us consider a honeybee is sucking nectar from hibiscus flower. Okay, during this process, maybe few pollen grains got stuck to its body. Now, when it lands on another hibiscus flower, then these pollen grains get dusted on the stigma of it while collecting the nectar. But if it falls on a rose plant or a chrysanthemum, then obviously there will be no pollination taking place. So the correct answer would be A. Large, colorful, fragrant flowers with nectar are seen in insect pollinated plants. So the solution for this, or the correct answer, is option 1. I hope you understood the solution for this question. Any doubts, please feel free to comment down below. Thank you. Have a good day.